friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams yet again. I'm so glad that you are here. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 books that I read during the second half of the month of January. I'm so pleased because one of my goals for 2022 is to read a little bit slower. And I didn't want to officially say I was going to cap my reading at 10 books a month, but I read exactly 10 books during the month of January. So if you haven't already seen, in my mid-month wrap-up, I talked about 6 books. Pictures of Hollis Woods, A Place to Hang the Moon, On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, which is the first Wingfeather Saga book, A Shadow Among Sheaves, and The School of Essential Ingredients, as well as Little Mercies by Heather Gutenkopf. So those are the 6 books. If you want more information about those, you have to go watch that video because I'm not going to talk about them here. But I am going to talk about the 4 other books that I read during the month. And look, one of them is really big. So let's just jump right in. The first one that I'll talk about is my patron book club book for the month of January. And I finished this the night before our book club chat about it. Oh, I was so glad that I got it in. But that is All the Lonely People by Mike Gale. This was just a huggable book. Oh my word. In this book, we follow Hubert Bird, who is a Jamaican man living in England. He came during the Windrush generation when young men from the Caribbean islands, the West Indies, came to England for work. It was following World War II. There just weren't enough jobs in the islands, and so they came to England where there weren't enough men to fill all the jobs that were needed because of the war. So Hubert was one of those men. He came to England, and in this book, we talk about what that was like for him. We get to meet his family in Jamaica a little bit, but we also get to see the racism and the things that he faced when he first moved to England. The structure of the book is set up in then and now chapters. So in the now chapters, he's a much older man. He has kind of isolated himself. He does not have a lot of relationships. He speaks with his daughter on the phone quite often though, and tells her made up stories of a very boisterous life where he is hanging out with these 3 friends that he made up and imagining all of these outings that they go on and such, but really he doesn't do much at all. He's got his cat, he's got his tea, and he just kind of stays home. And then in the then chapters, we learn about him coming to England and the racism that he faced and getting a job here and the beginning of his love story with his wife, Joyce, which was a beautiful, beautiful love story. Joyce is a white young woman though, and together as a mixed race couple, they face a lot of just tough situations. I don't know. I feel like Mike Gale handled this story with such care, and he does a perfect job of showing and not telling. We talk about that a lot when we're talking about books, that sometimes the author just kind of info dumps a lot of information on us. We don't get anything really info dumped on us. We don't learn a lot about this Windrush generation. I had to go and look that up. What is that? Afterwards. But we learn about the character of Hubert and about the people in his life, both in the then and the now chapters. I should finish though. In the now chapters, his daughter tells him that she's coming for a visit, and he panics because he does not know anybody. And now he's made up this whole life for himself, and he begins to branch out and try to make friends and meet people. And through that, he meets some of his neighbors and some other people, and it just was such a lovely story. I cried a couple times. I was very surprised a couple times. I thought it was just a beautiful picture of an older man letting down his guard and letting people in again. And it's a story of found family. It's a story of belonging, of friendship, of forgiveness, of grief, of loss, of loneliness, of racism. Like, there's so many things that get discussed in here with such a subtle hand. I loved this book so much. It is definitely, I feel like it's such an under the radar read. Not a lot of people have talked about it. I learned about it because of the Currently Reading podcast is one of the only bookish podcasts that I listen to every single episode that they put out. Katie, one of the hosts of that podcast, raved about this book, and that struck my interest. And then she did an interview with Mike Gale as well. Both of those are available to listen to. I would highly recommend checking out that interview that she did with Mike Gale if this book at all sparked your interest. But I gave this one 5 stars. I loved the discussion that I had with my patrons about it, and I just thought it was so well done. So well done. I did 2 buddy reads towards the end of the month, and the first of those was also a 5-star read, and that is Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. I absolutely loved this book. I will say right off the bat, one thing that really bothered me was the language in here. And I know some of you ask about that all the time, and it's not just curse words, but it's also taking God's name in vain, which really just gets under my skin. It didn't feel like it was gratuitous. It felt like it fit the character who was using these words, but it was just a little jarring because it happens quite often in this book. So just that's FYI. However, the title of this is so interesting, Ordinary Grace, because we really do explore grace in everyday type of situations. This whole story happens over the course of one summer. There's a bit of a mystery that goes on. There's a few deaths that happen, and we learn that right on the back. And so we kind of follow this 11-year-old boy. Well, it's an older man looking back on his life when he was 11 and this one summer of life. And during that summer, right at the beginning, there's a little boy who dies on the train tracks, and then another situation, and then another situation. And we're kind of warned about one of them being a tough situation right off the bat. So you're kind of waiting for that one to happen. So there's a little bit of a mystery, but it's about this kid who's a pastor's kid, and his brother who has a stutter, and their interactions with different people in the town, and trying to solve this mystery kind of on their own, and just an exploration of loss and grief. Again, I tend to gravitate towards books that deal with grief, but because it's such a universal thing, so many books talk about it, and grace. And I just thought it was really well done. I think William Kent Kruger's writing is phenomenal, and I really loved this book. I think I loved the story, the plot of This Tender Land better. This one felt a little bit slow at times, but the writing was just so spectacular. And there's one character, the dad, the pastor in here. I just loved him so much. And the way that he handled situations that were happening within his own family, and yet he's the pastor of a congregation, and how he handled it and carried himself and dealt with some tough situations. He just had some one-liners in there that I was like, whoa, there were zingers. Oh man, so good. So many good quotes, so much beautiful writing that and not flowery. I didn't feel like, I'm not a fan of flowery, overly descriptive writing. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about every once in a while there would be a line or a sentence that I would like, whoa, I love the way that he put that. It just was really good. It really connected well with me, and I love it. I'm very curious about William Kent Kruger's mystery series. I'm going to have to give it a try, I think. The third book that I'm going to talk about was my other buddy read, and it is book 5 of The Keeper of the Lost Cities. This one is called Lodestar. This is by Shannon Messenger. I've been buddy reading these with Amy's Bookish Life. Amy Bowman. I think it's Amy's Bookish Life. That is her new channel name. I could be wrong. She'll be linked down below. Amy and I read this one, and we're reading the whole series together, and we love it. Once you get into it, you just can't stop reading because it's so good. Like I've said before, Shannon Messenger is really good at a compulsive. She's very good at a compelling, propulsive plot. Like, you just get into the story, and it took me like 2 pages, and then I was like, okay, I'm in it now. And it just moves all the way through. This one had a little bit of a couple different places that were a little bit slower. Like, I was just, not that they were slow, there was still stuff going on, but the main part of the story that has carried on from past books that I can't really talk about, I was just waiting to get to the next part of that. And we were working our way there, but it felt like it took a little bit of time to get to it in this one. Not wasted time, and not time where I was bored. I just was eager to get some answers, and they weren't coming. And I know this is not the end of the series, so I knew it wouldn't answer everything, but I was just eager for more information. We do follow Sophie and her group of friends. There's something that I noticed even more in this one. I think she's great with these characters and developing them and giving each character more than just Sophie, our main character, but other characters also have an arc of their own and things that they're dealing with, and together as a team. Oh, it's just so good. And in this one in particular, they're young teenagers now. I mean, between 14 and 16 years old. And so there's a little bit of different characters crushing on other characters. And I appreciate that, because it feels realistic to a 14-year-old that she would have a crush on another kid or get embarrassed talking to a boy because he's just so good looking. Like, some of that felt very real to me. And I know I've heard from other people that as the books go on, romance does become a little bit more a part of the story. But I like that it's kind of innocent. It's definitely not a big part of the story. First of all, the storyline really has nothing to do with these little bits of relationship stuff in here, or romance, if you will. That's not really a big part of the story, but it's a part of their character. It's a part of who they are. And I love that. Sophie, our main character, also tends to be very impulsive and think that she knows everything at times. And that could get a little bit annoying, if you will. But I mean, I know 14-year-olds, and I was a 14-year-old who thought she knew everything. So it feels, again, just very realistic. So I gave this one 4 stars. It was not my favorite. I still like books 3 and 4 the best, but I still really loved this, and I'm very, very eager. I mean, this ended on a cliffhanger, just like book 4 did. Book 6 is Nightfall, and I cannot wait to dive into that one next month. This month. It's February now, Krista. And the final book that I finished in the month of January is Out of My Mind by Sharon M. Draper. This is a book that Amanda from the Curly Reader gifted me in our Christmas book exchange. And I'm so glad that she did, because I cannot believe that I hadn't read this book yet. What? In this book, our main character is Melody, and she is a genius. She has a photographic memory. She remembers everything that she learns. However, she's never spoken a word in her 11-year-old life. She has some developmental disabilities and possibly, is it cerebral palsy? I don't remember exactly what it was, because that just wasn't the main thing. I mean, it was a big part because she had this very active and imaginative and brilliant mind, but wasn't able to communicate that to the people around her, and had doctors and teachers and just other people brush her off and not pay much attention and kind of not have high expectations for her, except for a handful of people who really did, who could see that there was just something in there. And it just was a beautiful picture of this young girl and her fight to have a voice, and all that meant. I loved this book so much. I loved her parents. I loved her little sister. I loved the neighbor. Oh my word. And a handful of her teachers who were just wonderful. There was a big situation involving a quiz team. I feel like there was so much potential to learn a lesson there, and it didn't get learned. I don't feel like the lesson got learned. And I was just a little disappointed by that. It was still just very good. It was so very good. So I gave this one 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. So yes, glad that I finally read that middle grade book. Oof, it's been a long time coming. So these are the 4 books that I read in the month of January. Well, the second half of the month of January. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these 4 or any of the 6 that I read earlier in the month. I'm so pleased with myself that I kept it to 10 books. I did get a big chunk of Voyager read, which is the third book in the Outlander series. It's super long, and I've just been listening to that on audio little by little. But yeah, that's my wrap up for January. Let's chat down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on these books or anything else. I just love talking with you down there. And that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here and supporting my channel by watching and commenting and liking and all the things. You guys really mean a lot to me, and this channel has meant a lot to me, and I'm just so thankful. So very thankful. If you're interested in joining my book club, please consider becoming a patron. The link to that is always in the description as well. I would love to have you. And that's it. I'll talk to you in another video very soon. Bye.